I'm Danica Lorer, and this is Lit Happens, your celebration of the literary arts here in Saskatchewan. Today I'm very pleased to welcome Jerry Haigh. Jerry Haigh is a wildlife veterinarian, a storyteller, an adventurer, and an inventor. And I'm very pleased to welcome him. Jerry, thanks for being on Lit Happens this morning.
Great, Danica. Thanks for the invitation.
Now, you have a number of books about your adventures. Your newest one is Porcupines and Polar Bears. And so well, the story goes back. What led you to a life of being a wildlife veterinarian?
Well, luck, really. First of all, I was born in Kenya, and of course I had very little to do with the start of that. Then I could play a decent game of tennis, and then I failed my second year of veterinary school, which is not actually recommended, but the job I went to in Kenya wouldn't have been available if I'd graduated the proper year, so luck. And then my first case, 3 days after I arrived, was a lame giraffe, and it kind of went from there, cheetahs, rhino, and so on.
Well, and I think it goes beyond luck, because in your stories, you quite often they start with a phone call. And so you're not someone who turns down calls or who doesn't answer the phone. You answer the call and you go when people ask for your help.
Why not?
And so that's led us to, and some of your stories I've heard you tell.
Right.
And it's a delight to read them at my leisure and to see some of your pictures. And with your storytelling, you're a little unique in that you show us pictures sometimes while you tell your stories. But it's really nice to see the collection here.
Well, great, thank you.
Now, with the Porcupines and Polar Bears, we have the African stories in some of your other books. We have one of Moose and Men, which is based primarily on those big creatures that we are well acquainted
You've
with.
Had a problem with that. You actually met one on the road, didn't you?
I did, yeah.
Too close.
But Porcupines and Polar Bears is a collection that, well, just tell us a little bit about this collection.
Well, it's exclusively stories about work in Canada. The others, as you suggest, Africa or around the world with a moose story. This one is just work I did on various wildlife species in Canada. So I don't step outside that boundary, which takes me from the zoo here in Saskatoon, of course, where I was the zoo veterinarian for 16 years, out to the Atlantic on Sable Island, up to Baffin Island to work on polar bears, the Northwest Territories, Calgary Zoo even to do a hippo dentistry job. So there you are, quite a range.
And one of the interesting stories that I always find fascinating is the story of the lion.
George and his teeth. Yeah, well, we realized George wasn't eating properly and there was a problem. So by hook or by crook, by this time he knew very well who I was and didn't like me at all. We got an injection into him to slow him down. I had a look at the teeth, and 2 of them were actually producing pus from those big canine teeth, and that was ugly. No wonder he wasn't eating, because he must have been very sore. So next job, because it was way beyond my skills to do anything about it, was to call the dental college at the university, and I think almost all the faculty showed up. I don't know what happened to the human patients that day. Tough luck. And they decided they'd better put on caps, false teeth. So we anesthetized him, and they cleaned out the root canals, which are rather bigger than human root canals, of course. So they had to use stuff they got from a hardware store and pipe cleaners. And I hope I never get either of those in my mouth. And then they had this very clever idea of putting stainless steel teeth on as caps on top of those canine teeth. And he lived to a ripe old age, and now his skull is available for seeing at the veterinary school with those 2 stainless steel caps.
And there are some photographs in the book that are quite
Absolutely.
interesting to look at. Now, you said you have a little piece that you would read for us this morning.
All right, very short little piece, which actually doesn't involve any medicine at all. It was a very early case, and I've got a series of what I call fire engine cases in here, which stuff you had to deal with right away and get on with it. Didn't take usually very long. And this one is about, I've called it a small fire easily doused, and it's about a beaver, which I actually didn't touch. Some fires are more dangerous than others. Some can be put out with ease. This one didn't even need an extinguisher. Mild-mannered, experienced Dr. Ken Armstrong, one of the team of field service clinicians, happened to bump into me as I headed out of the door for my usual morning trip to the zoo. and I mean literally bump into, or maybe I bumped into him. He was backing out as he talked to somebody outside. I'd turned to speak to Marie, our somewhat acerbic receptionist, as I headed out the clinic door. We turned and apologised simultaneously. Before going any further, he stopped and asked if I had time to go to the farm of one of his dairy clients, Mr. Sawatsky. He had just been there on an emergency call to deliver a calf that needed assistance to exit its mother. While there, Mr. Sawatsky showed him a beaver that had somehow fallen into the manure trench behind the milking stalls. It could not get out because the deep, steep-sided trench had only a covered drain exit at one end. Ken's direction to the farm was straightforward. Mr. Sawatsky was in the yard outside the dairy barn when I arrived. He was expecting me. We looked over the side of the trench. The beaver tried to scrabble up the trench wall, but then it headed to the other end, looking agitated. "Have you got a sheet of plywood and some sort of slats?" I asked. We soon had the strips of wood, cannibalised from an old gate, nailed to the board about 30 centimetres, 1 foot, apart. We slid the boards into the trench as the beaver retired to the other end as far away from us as he could get. We moved away, and the animal went to the improvised ladder, ran up, and vanished out the door. Job done.
So many different adventures, and you have. I enjoy the polar bear stories because I've never seen a polar bear in the wild, and
Right.
And you have an interesting way that you marked the polar bears.
Oh, right. Okay. You didn't want, if you put a radio collar on a bear or something in a given year, the last thing you needed to do was capture it again that year. That would be kind of an insult. Bad news for the cubs if it had them. So the team carried Lady Clairol hair dye in large volumes, not the little thing that you might do. Well, you don't need hair dye, but I might. Anyway, mind you, it would make a hell of a mess up here, wouldn't it? So they had this pot of Lady Clairol hair dye and a brush. And once the polar bear had been immobilised and was down, and before it got up, great big black X followed by a number. So when you're flying over the top of it with your helicopter, oh, we did that one already. Let's leave it alone. And I doubt the Lady Clairol people ever realised quite what was going on.
But you have pictures in the book of the polar bears with the big numbers on their sides.
That's right.
I wonder if it bothered them at all that they had these numbers.
I don't know, because they'd shed their coat and it would be clean again the next summer or winter or whenever. We have no evidence that it bothered them. Maybe they could figure out who their buddy was because they could see X8 or whatever it was. I don't know.
Well, Jerry, thank you so much for talking to me today. That's all the time we have. Can you tell us where you can find your books?
Oh, it's around. It's McNally Robinson have it. Of course, you can get it at the library. You can rush out and buy it online or whatever.
All right. Thank you so much for being here.
Well, what fun. Thank you.
I'm Danica Lorer, and this has been Lit Happens. You can find past episodes by going to YouTube and checking Shaw TV Saskatoon. You can contact me by finding me on Facebook or at danicalorer@gmail.com.